Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and Blizzard released yet another encrypted Shadowlands patch. Now I say the words released, and a lot of you are probably thinking, oh wait, we can actually see some of the stuff. Has it been released? We can look at some of the content and updates. Well, we know that it's there, but it's encrypted. So I almost feel like Blizzard should be doing these releases for Shadowlands and just not letting us know. Maybe encrypt them even further so we don't even know that there's updates happening on the alpha. But we know there's updates continuously getting put out almost once a week basis or once every 2 weeks basis on the Shadowlands alpha. But they're encrypted, so we can't see any of the content. And honestly, I'm getting anxious. I want to see what the stuff is about. I want to see the new content. I want to see the new updates. Particularly, I want to see some of the stuff with classes. So in this video, let's talk about some of the things I really would want to see for Shadowlands as an upcoming World of Warcraft expansion. Covenants are going to be huge in the new expansion of Shadowlands, and in Shadowlands I'm hoping the Covenants are done right. It's going to be a different system than what we've had. Prior to this, we've had a lot of the AP systems, starting with Legion with the Artifact Weapon and into Battle for Azeroth with the Azerite Power, Azerite Shoulders, and all those goodies. But this new system is supposed to be different. It's not supposed to be an infinite grind. With the current systems and previous systems of Legion, you could do world quests or other activities like Mythic plus Maw of Souls or currently in BFA Islands in order to grind those numbers forever and ever and ever with a never-ending progression. Which is cool, some people liked it, and I think it was an interesting idea to add into World of Warcraft. But I was surprised when Blizzard decided to do the system all over again. It's something we are familiar with, but it's not something that I think we should have just stuck with and became the thing, because I feel by now that we haven't to do this all over again, a lot of people do not like these infinite grinding systems. The amount of roars and cheers that Blizzard got when they said they're no longer going to have an infinite progression system just shows this, and the Covenant system is supposed to replace this new progression system. And what I'm hoping out of Covenants isn't really the power differences. There's a lot of fears in terms of how strong certain Covenant abilities will be. What if you are a rogue and you love the Kyrian aesthetic? You love the transmogs and the rewards. What if the Kyrian ability suffers greatly in DPS compared to the Maldraxx's Necrolords? So it makes you feel like you should go with Maldraxx's, even though you don't really care about their progression of cosmetics, but the power that it gives you for your class is infinitely stronger in a raiding environment. If Blizzard is able to maintain these powers to be diverse and different, but also not really having one overscale the other, then they'll hit a pretty sweet spot where players can almost pick whatever they like without that much of a DPS loss. But I'm hoping that if Blizzard is able to nail the balancing, that the Covenant system offers a great variety of cosmetic rewards. I thought the AP weapon system did that really well, and it's kind of sort of something we see in the current system, but the essences just, and getting cosmetic uses of it, just don't look quite nearly as cool. But the AP weapons and the different skins and the recolors locked behind certain challenging pieces of content, long stretches of quests, or even PvP achievements I thought was a really cool idea. As long as Blizzard is able to nail the cosmetic rewards, the variety of them from back pieces, maybe even certain cosmetic pieces, and unique mounts for the different covenants, then I think this system will be mostly a success. I think a lot of people derive value not only from raw power progressions, but also the look of their character and the variety of rewards for challenging pieces of content. If I had to give an extra idea of what specifically they could do for really unique challenges is maybe Covenant weapons. This idea really comes from the Heritage Armor, where we get the Heritage Armor but we don't have Heritage weapons. How much cooler would your character with a full Heritage Armor like that of a guard would also have those Heritage unique weapons that no one in the game has unless you're playing that same race? Stuff like that would be really cool, and it would be unique to, let's say, being part of that Covenant. You get specific weapons with a unique look that can be applied to whatever transmog you want to run. I think something like this could be very cool, as you use your weapons in combat quite a lot, unless you're a feral or maybe a certain caster, but something like this could be interesting to see. Another thing I have concerns and hopes for are class changes. As of coming out of BFA, be honest, we are losing quite a lot of abilities. Even though we didn't gain a lot of things for our characters to play with, the Azerite traits, love them or hate them, they did change our gameplay in various ways. Some in very minor, where certain abilities simply did more damage, while other classes had actual gameplay changes where stacking certain traits offered you a whole new playstyle. And don't forget about essences. While Blizzard did say we will be able to use essences everywhere else in the world except for Shadowlands, in Shadowlands content, dungeons and whatnot, you will not be able to use your essences, so at endgame level they're basically more or less gone. Again, with that system, which was one of the better systems of BFA, like them or hate them, they did offer changes and uniqueness to gameplay. Taking a look at our characters, I feel like we're going to be in a very similar situation as coming out of Legion and losing our artifact weapon. Not only did we use our one unused ability from the artifact weapon, but also the passives that changed our playstyle. There's a variety of passives that a lot of classes lost, from major ones that were gameplay enhancing to smaller ones that gave you extra utilities that made your class feel kind of bland. And hoping to fill that void were the traits for BFA. Coming out of BFA, we are again losing a lot of those passives, so in a sense, characters are reset back to zero. And I know the Covenant system is supposed to have some power progression, but from what we've seen with the early images from BlizzCon, it didn't seem as comprehensive as that equivalent of an artifact weapon. Maybe the end product will be different, but what we've seen in BlizzCon didn't look nearly as extensive. So this really where it comes down to Blizzard trying to chisel out and define classes further. We all know that Blizzard doesn't really want to change classes drastically. However, I feel like the talent section and the honor talents could be huge for certain class playstyles. This is my honest belief, and it kind of stays going from Legion to BFA. The talents and even honor talents for PvP side of the game can really make a huge impact. The talents that we have right now, there's a lot of talents for a variety of classes that are useless or used in very unique situations. If you were to remove those talents and make more generalized talents that offer changes to how you play your character and create interesting combos that synergize with other talents, then I feel like you really could create some depth to a lot of classes. Of course, Blizzard could also take some of the passives that we used in BFA that ended up being kind of core to our class playstyle and add them as passives to characters, which they definitely should. But I feel like through talents alone, you really could create a lot of diversity in gameplay. Same thing goes for PvP side. I feel like Blizzard did not utilize honor talents nearly as heavily in BFA. A lot of good changes were done for a variety of different classes and specs, but I feel like a lot more changes could be done to go further. I feel like this is where honor talents can be played around a lot with in order to create opportunities for certain classes and specs to finally be viable or even good, and they haven't been used nearly as heavily. I'm pretty sure Blizzard has their own internal data on what talents are being used the most, maybe even for PvP. Some honor talents are just way too good and others are not ever worth picking in any situation. And this is where I think changing those honor talents to give new mechanics that are PvP only to certain classes would be very interesting. Certain classes come with a Mortal Strike effect, where their abilities reduce the healing that target takes. But what if certain classes that are behind in PvP got this as a base mechanic? It's a pretty major mechanic in PvP combat, and can increase the class's power without making them hit harder, but suppressing healing in arena situations can be different and interesting. Like Demon Hunters and the Mana Burn, which used to be a Shadow Priest or Priest-based ability from back in the day. Certain mechanics that are outside the box can make a class actually decent and create win conditions. And I think certain things could be set and left within only PvP combat, since honor talents only work in PvP. So in a sense, use honor talents to maybe take out talents that nobody ever uses, replace them with talents that might even create different forms of gameplay for those specs and classes within PvP. I think something like that could be a very interesting and maybe even a viable concept. Finally, revisiting gear upgrades and the RNG system of the game. I think for PvP, I can say this easily, PvP doesn't drop you nearly as much gear, at least right now in BFA, as the other parts of content. You can grind out gear in Mythic Plus dungeons or in raids fairly easily, and neither of those pieces of content have a vendor. PvP needs some change within that regard. You either need to start dropping more gear for PvP or add a vendor where people can buy specific pieces of gear. Maybe a vendor is what this game needs at this point. A lot of people have been asking for it, and maybe for a good reason. There definitely needs to be a lot more rewards just for doing arenas. I feel like some of the arena games that people can get into at a really high MMR can be nearly as challenging or just as challenging as tackling a 20+ key. Even though most of those games don't last nearly as long as a full Mythic Plus dungeon, I really do feel like they should drop a lot more gear, maybe every 5 wins or so it has at least a regular stream of gear. But of course, a vendor would also help solve those issues as well. So Blizzard has a choice of either throwing more gear, or if you are going to give players gear from time to time, at least let them choose exactly the stats and pieces that they would want. They talked before about how they want to address the RNG of, let's say, the Mythic Plus chest system by giving players the ability to at least choose what section of gear do you want. So you can choose an RNG piece, but at least it'll be something like choosing rings or necklaces, or pants and boots, or a chest or gloves. So at least you have different sections of pieces of gear. So let's say you have boots and pants that need to be upgraded, you could go with that section. So whatever piece of gear you get from there should be at least somewhat of an upgrade. I don't have any good suggestions on how Blizzard could change the RNG, but I do hope that during Shadowlands Alpha and Beta, as they test these systems, they really do listen to the community. RNG has been a pretty big issue in World of Warcraft for a bit. I think it would be a great time to squash it, and I believe the community input, like with the artifact weapons back in Legion, could go a long way. And we can't talk about gear without talking about corruptions. I feel that maybe in some way, corruptions could stay if they didn't deal this much freaking damage. The idea that you could maybe in Shadowlands get like a cursed item that has a negative buff but a positive buff. Nothing like infinite stars and doing nearly as much damage, but has some sort of a positive for a negative. But the system is maybe a little bit too blown out of proportion as of right now. The damage is definitely really high, but the negative effects I really do kind of like. I like this trade-off that players are able to do with their character. Maybe make themselves a little bit more risky in terms of the play, but the reward is pretty big. So I wonder if it's worth revisiting the system and redoing corruptions, but not in a massive impact, while still providing some sort of a significant gain for a player in terms of gear. Not such a significant impact where you are miles ahead of everybody just for having that item. Maybe something that is significant to a person that wants to min-max and do literally the most damage of everybody, where the average Joe would still feel the advantages of having this item, but not in a massive place where just having this item does 30-40% of your damage. I feel if they wanted to keep the corruption system and play with it more, balance would need to be the biggest concern. Or maybe this is where Blizzard might want to go in the other direction and simply just have a system where you can upgrade gear. Maybe something that the horrific visions can gain you, which are sockets on pieces. Maybe Blizzard continues that. You find a piece that you like at the highest possible level, and then you can put a socket into it to make your character even stronger. Something like that would be maybe a viable alternative without having RNG upgrades. Maybe for one expansion to see how much Blizzard liked the system and if it's actually better than what we've had so far. I think a lot of people would like that because RNG is something nobody likes because it can screw people over. But maybe it might be one of those things where you think you do, but you don't. But we won't really know, I feel like, until we try. And I do wonder if it's possible, and I'm not even making this as a request what I think should happen in Shadowlands, but I wonder if it's possible at this point to change the way that stats work in World of Warcraft. Not remove them or mess around, but I feel the secondary stats are such a massive impact, and having sockets on your pieces of gear almost requires a player, if they want to be competitive in World of Warcraft, to use external sites in order to find out if that piece of gear is really an upgrade. I feel that simming in World of Warcraft is never gonna go away. It's just something that became part of the gameplay. But I wonder if it's possible to change the game where the primary stats like agility, strength, and intellect are far more effective than secondary stats, at least for a good portion of the expansion, where just having more agility on a piece of gear in most cases is a direct damage upgrade. Yes, it might not have exactly the perfect stats you have, but it has 20 points more of agility, so it's a massive, massive upgrade. Something like this I feel like could be good for the game for a bit, as a variety of players feel that every time they get a piece, they have to run it through the sims and wait until find out if it's actually an upgrade or not. Something that could make gear a little bit easier to understand if it really is an upgrade for your character. But it could be a situation where we're way past too gone for something like that, and it's not something we can really come back from. I'm just wondering if that is at least a possible opportunity. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But that's going to be all that I have for now. Pretty sure a variety of you guys also have suggestions where you think Shadowlands should go and what you want out of Shadowlands. Feel free to comment down below. some of the things maybe you liked that I said, or some of the things that I didn't say but think should have been included, feel free to voice those ideas in the comments. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching this video. It was super enjoyable to have this discussion of what I personally would want out of Shadowlands. Thank you guys so much for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see all of you in another video.